information, I was wondering where it came from. The combined Eugene's program with the Oregon State Fire Marshal's program, which is, they're very different. So what does that mean? Who suggested it in the
Well, this is one of the challenges that we're going to kind of tackle as a Toxics board next. But it's always good for me to practice trying to explain this.
Very good.
So we really have been working on this for a couple of years because not last year when I went to City Council for the fee recommendation approval, but the year before. Unfortunately, I had to miss that meeting because my mother-in-law had passed away. And so Al, the fire marshal, filled in for me. And it was at that Toxics board meeting where, and Christine is just joining us. She just walked in the room. So I'm going to just repeat your question to Christine so she knows what we're talking about. Lisa was asking where the recommendation to combine the Oregon State Fire Marshal's program and the Eugene program came from, and I'm just kind of taking us through the history.
Okay.
So, I was just closing the door, Lisa. Sorry. So at that city council meeting, not this past year, but the year before, the city council and the city manager were getting, as the fire chief and the city attorney were trying to explain last week, were getting very concerned that they were starting to notice a trend of the fee and relatedly the program budget going up every year.
Yeah, no, I know all that. I was just like,
right. No, and I'm trying to, close the full circle to answer the question because it's part of it. So when I came back to town and I went to City Council for a special work session to address their questions and concerns about that trend, the assignment to me was to look into a series of 5 options of what to do with the program in the future so that we can avoid this. And the specific things they called out are that they wanted me to look into was that list that's on the cover memo of the, what is that? Sorry, I have so many papers here. Yes, thank you. On the, oh, it's right there, okay. Thank you. So work with the state to raise the $2,000 state imposed fee cap, maintain the program status quo, combine Eugene's program with Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office program, meet only minimum requirements of charter amendment, eliminate the program. So those were combined options that the city council and the city manager gave me and the Toxics board to research. If we did those, what are the pros and cons and the projected barriers to accomplishing any of those options would be. So that is the purpose. I mean, I hate having to think about sending this many pieces of paper in an information packet to City Council, but I think it's kind of necessary because I think they're going to kind of have the same questions, even though some of the questions came from their direction a few years ago. But it's so long ago, and this is not the only program or situation in the city that they deal with, that some of them are probably not going to remember that was actually their recommendation to look into.
yeah.
So that's why that's why I think it might be important, as even though it will increase the number of pages in the packet, to send that memo that really thoroughly shows the results of my research, what each option entails. And, you know, just everything I know about our program, the local program in Eugene, and what little I do know about the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office, just besides the, you know, basic fact that they are so different. If we were ever able to come to a compromise between the two programs, and I think this says it in the memo from a few years ago, it would take a huge compromise on both parts, and because the basic core guidelines for our program are written into the charter, part of that process would be going out to a vote for the public. So, you know, what it means is if the Toxics Board and the City Council and the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office folks who run that program could ever come to some kind of agreement on how to combine their two programs, which I think would take a lot of work and a lot of time, both programs would end up being different.
Yeah, I mean, based on my looking at the whatever these are, the reporting reports.
Hello.
Randy,
Randy's joined us too.
Oh, we have a tape recording minutes.
no, Lisa is on.
Oh, Lisa.
Yeah, I'm the minutes recorder for today.
Hello, Lisa.
Randy, do you mind sitting over here?
I will. I was kind of looking for a missing writing instrument. You get one turned in.
So what I was saying is from looking at these reports, it doesn't seem to me like our program is really anything like the fire marshal program, which is right. The reporting,
That's why I asked the question.
yeah, the purposes are just very different. What I had done before I came was made some notes about comparing the Toxics, our program with the TRI database. Because when I look at what, you know, the labels on what they're reporting, they've got five categories they're reporting under: air emissions, surface water discharge, releases to land, underground injection, and transfer to off-site to disposal. Well, we have, you know, they have air emissions, we have category 05, emitted to air. They have surface water discharge, we have category 07, surface water release. They have releases to land, and I don't see a parallel to that in our program. I'm not even sure what releases to land would, I mean, we don't do that anymore.
Not supposed to.
Airing something.
I would have to check on it, but I would think that would not be something on purpose.
Yeah, okay.
You know,
Right.
But they still have a category for it because things still happen.
Yeah.
With septic tanks, if something was seen as being completely benign, would a commercial, well, there's no place in the city of Eugene that a septic tank would operate, but I mean.
Well, so that's a category under the TRI, the Toxics
Yeah.
Release Inventory.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is yeah.
I mean, could any business ever, maybe even there, flush something down the toilet to a septic tank? That would be a release to land.
Well, I don't know, but
I would have to check in with them, because I'm not an expert on the other programs.
right, but so I didn't see an obvious parallel between releases to land and something in our program, but it also didn't seem to me like releases to land would be a very common reporting category. At the
Well,
same,
the release means release to landfill.
well, no, it doesn't, because there's transfer, there's transfer off-site to disposal. I guess could you have on-site landfill that I suppose could be released to land?
Well, lots of companies have holding ponds, and I don't know if that's considered water or not, because the purpose of it is to settle into sediment, which is land. So
Right.
that's sort of drainage and in between.
Right. Well, so the other TRI categories are underground injection, which I don't think anybody's doing that in Eugene. That's,
Fracking.
yeah,
Mhm.
something. And then the transfer off-site to disposal, and we've got category O3, ship as waste. So it seems to me like, I mean, I know that we have a much lower threshold for volume, right, for reporting than TRI, but it seems like mostly whatever you reported to TRI, is there a way that that could be slotted into our reporting program, basically?
We could look into it. I regularly participate in their, in a number of their work groups, monthly and twice monthly conference calls. And early on, I have had discussions with how I would like to consider, have us talk about and consider seeing if we can combine our programs. And one of their directors, who's based in Washington, D.C., said she would be happy to form a work group when I was ready to do that. But I kind of wanted to spend my energy and limited time cleaning up our program first and getting it current before I start having other people really examining it.
Yeah. I mean, my suggestion in response to the city council's question number 3 about combining Gene's program with Oregon State Fire Marshal's program is that doesn't make any sense. And if we're gonna look at combining or coordinating any programs, we would be coordinating with the TRI, but.
I agree with that. One's an inventory and the other's oriented to releases, which was the concern of the amendment.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What are your thoughts on that, Lisa?
I agree, and I think that's why I asked the question about the fire marshals. I just couldn't believe that would be considered a solution because of all the points Christine raised. Did I address your question?
Yes.
Can't see anybody's face.
Oh, yes. Well, and one thing that might be a useful discussion for us as a board to have is to ask some of the folks that do the reporting, do you know exactly what it means in the TRI reporting when it says release to land, or?
Oh, yeah, we could start there.
I think you can simplify things for the council by giving a little explanatory sentence about the fire marshal report and the TRI. That the fire marshal reporting program is to help responders in case of emergencies to know what inventories could be a danger in unexpected circumstance, but that the EPA's TRI program is similar to the Eugene Right to Know in that it is designed to identify ongoing releases to the public as a health hazard rather than emergency help.
Well, and tell me if this doesn't make sense, but in my mind, Randy, that was the purpose of this comparison matrix that showed specific items for each of the community right to know programs, just right next to each other. So the program name, the purpose, the public access, who must report, the reportable chemicals, the number.
And we do have a sentence in our memo towards the end that says, Eugene Toxics Right to Know program requires materials balance accounting. This information is not part of the CR2K reports, which those are the fire marshal, right? That's the Oregon Fire Marshal reports. Because these, I guess we could clarify it because we could say because the C says these, but we could say the CR2K reports only identify the amounts of materials present at a site, not materials balance accounting.
Oh, okay, so just add that clarifying piece.
Is that what you're talking about?
I think so. I see the language here, and it does, especially the one on the fire marshal report, is quite clear. Provide first responders on hazard hazardous substance, well, and the public. One's for emergency special circumstances, the other is ongoing health hazards, and if we can kind of, you know, make it contrast. And then there is the difference between the TRI and the R measure, which is the public information, easy public access, but it is the same kind of information as the EPA's and not the same as the fire marshal report. And make it so that when a person just glances at it, they just see or, you know, immediately understand. Well, the one is a static inventory, case of emergency, the other is what's the health impact of, you know, and that's why we have accounting of where everything goes. And ours with the extra feature of public access.
Right, well, that is also captured towards the end of the matrix, where it talks about what the added value is. And just to refresh everybody's memory, because it's been a while since we've talked about this one, what I did for the other programs is I made contact with the managers of those programs and had them review what we had written previously, and I had them update. So they're experts on their program, and this is how they wanted to showcase their programs. So in the matrix, I would be reluctant to change the language or the facts, because I'd like to think they know more about their program than I do, or
Well,
the previous staff.
I like what you have here, value added to the community.
I think that was your suggestion, actually.
Okay, provides emergency responders and emergency planners, and that could like be up front as well, it's very similar to the sentence, but it's better even than the sentence in purpose. And when it says provides the public with information to gain familiarity, it does confuse a little bit because it is hard for the public to get access to the fire marshal reports. So even though it may be accurate that there is a manner and that it is sort of a community right to know, on a practical level, the way people and the council and everybody would be thinking of it, it might confuse them. It might provide a legal means, but unlike ours with a website accessible to anybody in the world, it's doesn't quite work out. So I mean, just the reason, the question was, you know, well, how could they have confused this so much? And so we've got to, you know, hone our message down to make it clear right off. And even though it's technically correct that the fire marshal is a public reporting community right to know, it doesn't mean that any middle schooler can go and find out, which is what our program does have.
Well, where we talk about those kind of specifics is in the advocacy section of the report, is where I would suggest that we add a sentence. So I feel like I've lost track of what Christine was recommending.
Down here.
But don't lose that thought, Randy, because I want to also make sure, if all advocacy members agree, add that in as well. So what were you saying? I'm sorry.
Where would you add it?
Pardon me?
Where would you be adding it?
Oh, so in the gap impact analysis report, Lisa, the advocacy section, we would add as one of the bullets.
Oh, okay, this one's one.
Yeah.
Well, I was just suggesting, I don't know, do you think that the city council is gonna know that CR2K is the same as the Oregon State Fire Marshals Program? Or
I should specify that for them.
clarify that somewhere, okay.
That's probably, I think that's contributing to confusion is that their name, which indicates the legal fact of compliance and public access, is so close to ours, but it's so different what we're doing.
I think the other small clarifying thing, we say these reports, I don't, just because we're throwing around so many reports and so many different things, we could say, because the CR2K reports, just replace these.
Oh, I see.
And then we could say only identified. As opposed to,
And I had another bullet point there was ready.
Lisa, can you hold on while I write down, because I'm
Yeah.
facilitating and forgetting that I'm supposed to be writing. I want to capture what Randy wanted to add in.
Mhm.
So Randy, do you mind restating
The,
that you just want to call out the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office?
yes, in the last part, the sentence provides emergency responders and emergency planners to assist them with hazardous materials, pre-emergency planning and response. Just that clause, it's followed by a semicolon, but that is, if it just stands alone, gives the right impression
Okay.
without, because it doesn't talk about community right to know, even though it's technically is, but it just summarizes what it's, that we put that up front in introducing it. Primarily to provide emergency responders, you know, and then on this case of R and the EPA, if we need to provide the public with information about potential releases on an ongoing basis that affect community health. And the TRI and the Eugene Toxics.
Oh, okay. So are you okay with me listing those comments as bullet points in the advocacy section of the report versus changing the matrix?
Yes, because I think they're
Okay.
going to, yes,
Because we want to
that's more
highlight that in the
effective. I
memo.
think that the memo is going to be read
Okay,
before the matrix is studied.
okay. And what was your item, Lisa?
Because I would appreciate, at some point, having you read those back, just so I know. It's hard when I can't see you guys, just so I know exactly what's being added as bullet points to our report. I mean, I heard Randy say it, but I just wanted to, maybe
Okay,
at the very end, you can review everything that's been added.
okay, help me remember, Kate.
Okay. Under the, I think it was under the bullet point that starts with, compare data report between Eugene Pro, I'm on page 2, kind of in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that's said in here about it being material balancing reporting, I think that needs to be explained better and expanded. And the comparison with the TRI is a very good example of why the Eugene program is so superior. Maybe we don't want to use the word superior, but you know,
Right.
more efficient, effectual, and accurate. Is that in the under TRI, reporting is self-reporting, meaning the polluter is reporting, and they don't have to show any. Not any, that's not the right word, but they don't have to provide much in the way of background documentation to show how they arrived at the number. With material balancing, it requires the reporting company to balance in the sense of their books, which is hopefully beneficial to them, but provide absolutely accurate reporting on emissions and use of toxic products. So I guess what I'm saying is, let's see, where is the section on materials balance?
I think it's that last bullet.
Yeah. So you said TR.
Yeah. So we should define what that is more, or I'd like to define it and describe what is materials balancing, and then I'd like to add a bullet saying that no other program, neither LRAPA nor EPA TRI, are accurate to the degree that the Eugene Toxics reporting program is.
What would you think of putting it in the same paragraph here that says it's the only one that provides a great level of detail, On the use of individual hazardous substance from an extensive list, chemicals meeting the definition, also reported, even if they're not in this. Say further, it is the only one that requires documentation rather than self-reporting of all.
I think it should be a separate bullet point.
Okay, well, maybe if it's just after the two together, they can see the 2 bullet points put next to each other, then they would get the impression that it's much stronger and effective.
Yeah, and so this is marked towards the top, so Randy was referencing the 3rd bullet down. The 4th bullet down has a pretty good definition of materials balance accounting.
Oh, no, I knew I'd seen it, okay.
But I can definitely describe it more in like naming out the 4 input categories and 11 output categories. Is that too much?
Isn't she saying that they have to show the supporting documentation in our program?
Well, right, I'm just saying in terms of better defining what materials balance reporting is.
What that documentation is?
Perhaps it's not necessary, since this is an overview document. If I were wordsmithing, I would end that sentence here. I'd say, it is the only program that requires material balancing accounting, meaning that total inputs and total outputs are equivalent, period.
Yeah.
I think the rest of it started me off thinking about other different kinds of things, about, wow, that's a little bit to report, is that onerous? I started thinking other thoughts. But just to end with the word equivalent and then go on to say something about this,
4 input.
it creates accuracy and doesn't, right on the phone. This is unlike EPA TRI, where it's self-reported and doesn't require good accounting.
Yeah.
Data.
You could just say accurate.
Doesn't require transparent accounting data.
There you go.
Okay. Okay, so should that be part of that same bullet point or a separate? Okay.
It could be like an intent, the part about comparing to the EPA TRI could be an indented bullet, like you have lower down.
Yeah,
As
okay.
an example, why it's so important, why it's unique.
Okay,
And
excellent.
I don't know how Christine and Randy feel, but the reporting down to the smallest accounting unit, that should be moved or just simply deleted. To me, it could be a point.
I agree. It just gets you wondering about how much is that and how dangerous could that be?
Yeah.
We just
that's
want to
what I
say
went with, yep.
we're more interested in the fact that the equation has to balance, not the numbers within the equation.
That's fine with me if we want to take it out.
Yeah, and just for people who would be interested in that information, this detail is captured in the program, Community Right to Know program comparison matrix.
Sure.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the information is not lost if we take it out of this memo, but that might be just a little bit too much detail.
Yeah.
Not that I get an opinion, but I agree with you guys.
It's good and perfect in the matrix.
Yeah, okay. So, was that it for you, Lisa? Because then I'll read the 2 things that I got from Christine and Randy. Was that yes?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, I kind of am not that organized, so bear with me.
Oh. So at the beginning, the top of the second page, talking about the LRAPA report does not contain information regarding emissions of specific toxic substances. And there's a typo. That is readily accessible to members of the public.
Thank you.
The main thing I see is the difference between LRAPA and they cover a very different range of toxics. They don't even cover things like, I'm trying to think back can't think of it.
J.H. Baxter?
Anything. They don't cover half the amount of chemicals. They lump them together under hazardous air pollutants. So you can't really tease out a lot of these different chemicals from LRAPA reports. So that's number one. And then the other big difference is they only cover air emissions. Only. So LRAPA could never substitute for this. DG Toxics Right to Know, which also covers emissions to water, releases to landfill, toxics that remain in a product. That LRAPA is just so narrow. So I really felt we needed to say that.
Now, could we also like put in a comma or something? The LRAPA reports do not contain information regarding emissions of specific toxic substances covered by this, comma, nor is it readily accessible to members of the public.
Right, because it's so technically dense.
Okay.
And then number three, or comma, and it only covers air emissions.
Well, yeah, just
covers one pathway. How did I say?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, I got it.
I would just like to say that. Just say only air emissions are covered.
Mm-hmm.
Then the brain will think like, oh yeah, there's those others. So I just can I just have suggest one word change on the first part of this. It says each program has very different reporting requirements. I just like to put in significantly different instead of very, so we're not, this for the tone.
Where is that?
Way back here at the second paragraph of the advocacy information. A comparison of all these ones shows each program has very different reporting requirements. And actually, then we sort of kind of go and say, yeah, this is the same, this is different. I'd just rather say significantly and move on as we are to show how it's significant, although there are some things that are the same, instead of trying to sort of oversell it.
Okay. So just to capture, I was trying to find where these reports. Christine.
Where is that in here?
Yeah, where is this?
That needs that piece.
Okay, so that is.
I'd also like to just strike one word that this is the greatest value added to the community due to the following factors. Could we just strike the word factors, due to the following? Because factors is kind of like a mathematical thing.
Beginning of the second.
Okay.
I mean,
And
Yeah.
chart. Okay. So, almost have my act together, Lisa. Since we're not live streaming. Okay. So one clarification, Randy, adding that, statement about the value added to the community for the state program, where do you think would be a logical place to add that?
Well, I guess further down, since this is a list of why this program works best, you could say,
I mean, I'm kind of thinking, maybe like a final bullet.
yeah. You could just say, by contrast, the fire marshals, state fire marshals report, parentheses, community right to know, is primarily, and then the words that are in the matrix, is primarily to provide emergency responders and emergency planners. So,
Okay. Okay. So you ready?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, does anybody have anything else?
Well,
Oh, yes.
I already have something else, but I've been looking at this chart, the reporting vacancy comparison matrix.
Yes.
And on, so this is on page 2 of 3, under state and reporting quantities. It says average amount on hand, maximum amount on hand, amount transported in, and amount transported away, and location. I didn't, my memory from looking at the report was it did not have all of that information. Did I miss something?
Let me look.
Because I think this report just has maximum on site for tread.
yeah, the fire marshal report, isn't that just a snapshot of what's there?
Or are there more parts to the report that we didn't get? Was that other information not available, or?
Okay, so, I would have to call to fully answer that question. But, so the reports that we have are what are publicly accessible.
Okay.
But for first responder personnel, they get a whole other different level of report,
Okay.
that might have some of the information that's listed here, that we might not be able to find here. And I know they just recently, went through a 2-year process to, change their reporting program. So this could be like what used to be included, but it's.
Oh, right, because they really raised their limit to it.
Yeah, so
How about,
the location is. I don't see location.
Well, I mean, they have a side interest.
Right, but not a specific location.
how about for that sentence, if we said average and maximum amounts on hand, comma, amounts transported in and away, comma, and location. Location of, on-site location.
Well, I mean, again, these were written by the primary program managers for that program.
Doesn't change the meaning. Average and maximum amounts.
Right.
And,
I mean, that's.
But what's concerning to me is that doesn't seem like what we got.
Mm-hmm.
And part of my response that the fire marshal report, program is so different from ours is that we're not getting anything that says amount transported in and amount transported away.
is that,
Make it a little more like our program, but not.
do you believe that's part of the new update to the program, the reporting of fire marshals?
I have no idea. I would need to call.
I mean, when I did one of those reports, it was 20-some years ago. I don't have recollection.
Well, I don't know why not, Randy.
I mean, of anything about, how much came in, or, most of those. I do know it was supposed to be
the amount on hand, like a snapshot, and where. So those others could be new features.
Well, I hate to go back and start messing with this
Yeah,
matrix that we've already spent so much time with, but if that is in fact what they report, but we as the public can only get the maximum amount on hand, then maybe that information should be somehow covered in this
so
data,
this,
which I guess would go under the public access information on page 1.
so this contradicts with what we've said in the written memo?
No.
Okay.
Not necessarily. Okay, so, as I have been thinking about this and, reviewing this information, my mind goes crazy with questions, and I always have to remind myself that the purpose of our report to city council is to provide them with an overview of the comparison between these programs and showcase what the Eugene Toxics Right to Know program brings to the table, so that if it ever came to the point in the community where the discussion got to, we're gonna eliminate this program, we would have all record documentation of this is what the community would no longer have access to and why. Because nobody was asking us to suddenly become experts in other programs, or even, how do I wanna say it, scrutinize, like what they say they give, what they don't. What I think we can do, is call out that, well, they say that their, reporting quantities are this, average amount on hand, maximum amount on hand, amount transported in, transported away, and the location, but we don't see that reflected in the report. So we can just keep it at that level.
Again, we do have this sentence that the materials balance is not part of the CRTK reports because those reports only identify the amount of materials present at a site, but if in fact apparently, well, I guess the report we're getting only identifies the amount present at the site.
Yeah. Well, if we say that we're only identifying the amount on site, but here in the matrix, we said they report the amount on site, but also the amount coming and going onto
Yeah.
the site. That is a little bit of a contradiction.
That's right.
And we don't want to be picked apart on little mistakes.
Well, they're,
I could see why the fire marshal would want to know that, how much hydrofluoric acid is coming down the highway, and going out of the plant, And so it makes sense they would have added that, but we should, consistent with our summary, this is for emergency planners, is the main purpose.
well, so maybe maybe this sentence, this information is not part of the CRTK reports available to the public, because these publicly available reports only identify. Maybe that's, makes that
I
accurate.
see, so you can,
Right, that's
Okay.
exactly what I was saying.
all right, even then, we still want to,
But is that, are we, I mean, you got what was publicly available,
Right.
that's it, okay.
Right. Always trying to keep in mind, we want to present some information, and, if city council wants us to go into that detail, then we can do that like in the next phase.
but if we're saying something about a community right to know stuff being available to the public, and you're saying that the site inventory is to a greater degree than the transport figures, I would like to use the word nominally, because you don't just like go in and say, hey, how much does so-and-so have on site? They have to say, oh, fill out this form and do this and so on before we'll tell you. And that's different from our program, and so I don't want to, especially since they have the right to know label in theirs, to confuse people about, oh, you can find it. I would say nominally, for anything that in the fire marshal's report that can be obtained by the public with more difficulty, that we somehow
Because
flag
it
it.
can be obtained by the public,
If you would, or,
instead of publicly available.
yeah, just say simply publicly available. We want to say the Eugene measure is publicly available or easily available to the public. And theirs is nominally available or technically available or, you know, limited avail, but it's not limited, but it,
No.
I mean, how difficult is it to get that information?
What information?
If I want to know how much hydrofluoric acid some manufacturer has, how long do I have to wait? Do I have to file freedom of information, or, I mean, not freedom, but I mean, do I have to?
Lisa, have you requested specific chemical information on a specific company
From,
through a state fire marshal?
yes, and I didn't get any response.
Then let's say nominally, or less prejudicial.
Through the official form through their website.
And you didn't, and they didn't answer.
Nope.
So, well, we could say purportedly, but we'll just say nominally. It's supposed to be available, right? But it's questionable.
Well, that's what they say.
Yeah, but she
I mean,
didn't
and
get it.
they have that on their website.
Yeah, well, we'll say nominally, you know, she probably had to make 10 follow-up calls that haven't been made yet, but.
I made one follow-up email and let it go at that.
Yeah, well, that's a far cry from the Eugene Toxics Right to Know website.
Good point.
Okay, so,
I mean, we could say not part of the CR2K reports available to the public
No?
upon request.
Oh, in parentheses, or, I don't know, do you think nominally is a little prejudicial, or?
It's a little inflammatory.
Well, you could, if you put in parentheses, upon request, available to the public, parentheses, upon request, upon special request,
Yeah, special request.
that
Well,
kind
obviously
of,
we have to go to some effort to get them.
yeah, that's what we want to make sure people understand.
so, do we wanna add, another sentence or another bullet about how the state, says their public reports include all this information, but in fact,
Only part of it is available to the public upon special request.
or do you think available to the public is enough said about it?
I mean, is that really true that, like, if I mean, couldn't couldn't the planning commission or somebody ask for and discuss at a public session, figures in the state fire marshal report, which that apparently now include, like, we have so many trucks with this much hazardous materials going down this highway, to decide whether to put the kindergarten playground, you know, at the dangerous intersection or something. I mean, couldn't they get that legally? Or, I mean, would it just be, they'd have to go to court or something? And if the company said or somebody says, well, we don't want terrorists knowing. I
No,
mean,
they have to make a request.
so
And when you make a request, this is what you get.
the public couldn't ask for that information
Yes.
about transport of the materials.
The transport?
Yeah, because that's what the difference is that the transport is not public.
No.
So like, if I want to know how much stuff is, you know, dangerous stuff is being trucked into that plant, because I think maybe some of it's evaporating, spilling, creating a hazard of accident, that I wouldn't, that only the authorized providers can assess the issues with the transport of these materials. That's, whereas I could, as long as I showed, you know, that I'm, for some reason, have the reason to know, I could find out how much is in the big tanks, you know.
Well, I mean, maybe this does seem like a point of information we need to have clarified, maybe from somebody with this program, the Oregon Community Right to Know and Protection Act. And maybe we could add something to this public access information box on page 1 of 3 of our chart. Because we have, you know, we say that you have to file an online information request, that sort of thing, maybe we can say that, you know, maximum amount on hand is the only data point that's available. Amount transported in, amount transported out is not available to the public. I don't,
Yeah, that sounds good.
That sounds good.
whatever the language is that should go in there.
Yeah. Of course, we don't have the specific quantities on transport in that form, but I think you could find it out from the mass balance in county. Is that right?
We have brought on site,
We do?
yep,
Okay, then we do.
and shipped as product, shipped as waste.
So that would be important for communities to know, apart from the professionals, just like what issues there are for accidents or ongoing releases even. Not every truck is vapor. It's like the coal dust thing, you know, I mean, stuff blows off the top. There could be hazardous materials escaping during transport. So the community, not just the government officials, should be able to know. And apparently, even though we don't use the word transport, we say brought on site. That is an advantage of our program.
Yeah, I think we covered. I think we covered that. Go ahead, Lisa.
Can I interject something?
Yep.
I love this conversation, but I just also want to point out that probably one of the most important things our group has to do is to now translate why all these special attributes of the Eugene Toxics Right to Know deserve funding for that staff position in the board, which is, isn't that really the crux of what we also have to impart in our memos?
Kind of, I mean, it's related. So again, the full gap impact analysis report is gonna be part of the 2014 Toxics Board annual report on the program. And we're gonna show a section from the industry perspective with their recommendation for the future of the program, from the advocacy perspective with all of your combined recommendation for the future of the program. And then Christine, our neutral member, is gonna weigh
And Andre.
excuse me, Christine. Yeah, Christine has a dual role now.
Yeah.
I apologize. Yes, Andre is gonna weigh in from a neutral perspective, also kind of bringing in some points that Stephen weighed in on while he was still on the board. And then the entire Toxics Board group is going to make the joint recommendation for the future of the program.
I would summarize, and maybe we could develop language, summarize this, you know, why do we exist? Because historically there's been a problem with regulatory agencies becoming too cozy with the people that are regulated, and the public has to be included to ensure there's full enforcement. In the federal government, the response that was made was to allow for citizen suits where lawyers' fees would be allowed, thereby giving a monetary incentive to search out the defects or the failings of the regulatory agencies. In this case, we are providing minimal support to staff to allow citizens volunteering because they live in the communities to search out the information and blow the whistle on any irregularities or failure to enforce. There is no monetary reward for finding most of this is just not applicable to any federal citizen suit litigation, which involves a lot of money. If you win, and judgments have been won here on citizen suits in the Eugene Springfield area, and there's a lot of money. But our alternative here is simply to provide information to the public so that without
the incentive of money, we could still, alert, expose any failure to improperly enforce the laws as written. And so that would kind of be the angle. We could say, oh, that's why it's worth it, because the city of Eugene and other people won't be liable for multi-million-dollar lawsuits, because the federal government under Nixon decided that was the best approach, was to allow for big judgments when the agencies fail to properly carry out or even to recommend new rules that protect the public. So here we're just talking about information so that citizens without any financial incentive, just to protect themselves, can ask for that. And I think that could be persuasive, and say, even though there is nobody's suggesting that we have citizen suit lawsuits authorized here, where lawyers who sue successfully can be paid, it still shows that we're just approaching the same problem that did do that in a more cost-effective, low-cost method, and it's completely recognized as a problem that regulatory agencies fail to either carry out the existing laws or to recommend updates to regulations and carry out their mission to protect the public. So I hope it would have to be shorter than what I just said.
Yes.
But that would be an argument I think is persuasive, is that this is a less costly method to fill that need, which has been recognized for now about 40 years. That agencies fail to either carry out the rules or carry out their mission to protect the public by updating and recommending appropriate new rules. And so, I think that's a good. A lot of people think that citizen suits are, well, I mean, they don't really understand it, but it just means lawyers can get money, so things will start happening. But this is, if citizens can get information, things will start happening to make sure things are, the public is protected.
So do you think, so Lisa and Christina, I want to hear from you on Randy's comment. And I'm thinking maybe an additional sentence or two about how the Eugene Toxics Right to Know program is
Low cost.
yeah, just trying to think of a better word.
Public transparency focused or something.
Yeah, but I mean, low cost is a good point. I was just trying to think of a better term. And since this is a public information program and not a regulatory program, I really don't want to further confuse readers or interested parties on using the word regulation.
So we say it's a low-cost way to ensure that regulatory agencies are adequately carrying out their mission to protect public health and safety.
I don't think the purpose of this, the purpose of this program is to provide information. It's a right to know. It doesn't have there's no requirement that anybody reduce their emissions or
Yeah.
Correct.
their use of hazardous materials.
Right.
But isn't it implicit that by giving information to the public, the reason they would want it is to scrutinize the regulations and the agencies to see that everything, maybe that's not explicit, but I think it's implied.
It's not explicit. Right to know is one of the foundational underpinnings, I suppose, of human rights, human environmental rights. That we have the right to know what's being put into the common space, the common air, the
was it explicit that we have a right to know, not so much because we want to know what killed us, but because we'd like to prevent it from killing us?
Yes, and that is, like you said, implied, and the whole, knowledge is power kind of idea, or the campaign for passage of the ordinance was ignorance is toxic. And knowledge is healthy, I guess.
So is a sentence or two along this line going to help show support for the program, or is it gonna be somewhat confusing?
I'm concerned it might be a bit confusing, and it also might be a bit, it might, people who don't like the program don't want the city of Eugene being a regulator, and
Yeah.
among many other things they don't like about the program. So,
But we aren't the regulator.
right,
But we're just, the same distaste that people might have for more regulatory agencies in the picture, thinking that maybe this implies more regulation, which it doesn't, can somehow be used if we say, everybody knows that agencies don't always do their job. And that's what we are. And the federal government recognized it in the 1970s by making provisions to reimburse lawyers who proved that it was, when that was the case, that they could be paid. In this case, we provide information to the public so they, without pay, can ensure that agencies do their job right.
I'm not quite following how our information would help people know that agencies are doing their job.
Well, if there's a variety of ways. You could find outright lack of enforcement of something that's explicitly written. You could also, for the public, could look at something that is a hazard and is a new situation, a new chemical that should have been added to a list of regulated things. So you could find.
Well, we're not going to have anything on our list that isn't already on the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act.
Okay, well, maybe the idea of a new emission
I do
thing,
think.
but just that if a rule needs to be updated, if there are emissions of something that has been determined by new information to be a health hazard. So even if a rule hasn't been stated to say only, LRAPA's rules do not get specific about how much of a certain chemical can be released, but scientific information is coming out. If the public, because they care about their own health, not because there's some financial carrot added, finds that out, wants to go to their legislator and ask the legislature to change requirements, and this enables them to do so. Our information being readily accessible.
Did we have a sentence about having multiple reports allows the public to compare? Was that one we had in the email? Can't remember.
Multiple reports.
Allows the public to identify possible sources of reporting or something.
So here I have your email. Multiple sources of reporting data allows citizens to identify inconsistencies and possible errors in reporting. Was I supposed to add that to the report?
No,
Oh, I see. I knew it was.
Well,
I'm sorry, it wasn't clear.
Well,
No, it's
that's
not.
a good one to add, that this is the only, nobody else is cross-checking the reports. Why
Yeah.
not give it to the public to allow, if anybody cares, because nobody else is doing it. That's an example of why public awareness, public information should be out there.
so maybe we could just have
Yeah.
that having as a new bullet point somewhere, having multiple sources of reporting data allows citizens to identify inconsistencies and possible errors in reporting.
Having multiple sources available to the public allows
Yes.
identification of any inconsistencies, because nobody in government is tasked with the job of doing that.
I mean, what this looks like to me is that Oregon Rubber doesn't care about the accuracy of the Eugene Toxic Strengths Report, where they've listed 0 pounds of zinc contents going to the landfill will shift as waste, whereas they've listed 810 pounds of zinc compounds being disposed of at the landfill for the TRI.
If that's clear enough from the Oregon thing, we could even say, note the example of, maybe
I don't know
not.
if we want to call it that.
Well, yeah, I would caution against that.
But the point is there's no pollution czar that checks everybody to, it's gotta be the public instead of any all-powerful government office or official that makes sure that everybody is, doing everything right. It's going to be the public in this case that will check up on things.
I'll summarize over my additions. Just kind of referencing the email from Christine. Second sentence said, I would be interested in hearing from some of the industry reps what they think about the zinc oxide versus zinc compounds issue. I would just like to add that as an item to the next toxics board meeting, and I'll send and bring the information.
Okay.
So I'll send it ahead of time, and then we can have them see what they think, because they're more familiar with the reporting.
Right. So, because you had brought up I think there's 2 zinc issues, right? Or,
Yes.
because you've got, okay. So we've got the 810 pounds of zinc compounds being disposed of as waste, 0 pounds of zinc-ish in ours, and then this, I think you were identifying in your previous email, second page of that.
Oh, yeah.
This one.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, good. I wanted to talk about that, so thanks for that reminder.
Do we have to use this CR2K report as the label for the fire marshal's report everywhere?
That's what they call it themselves.
What if we just called it the fire marshal's report? And somewhere made reference to the formal title of it, because it's a very different approach to community right to know between the two. I'm not saying it isn't, but I mean, to have posted right on a public website is one way to do community right to know. To allow the legal opportunity, an opportunity to file a request for information that they're required to provide after so many follow-up emails is a different interpretation of community right to know. And every time I see community right to know, I think, oh, that's us.
Christine and Lisa, what do you think?
Well, I do think we need to do something to have consistent language between this, number 3 on the front, we have the Oregon State Fire Marshal Program. Is that?
Yep.
That's the
CR2K.
Community Right to Know Infection Act. So,
Oh, I see, yeah, that's another good point.
so maybe we need to,
Let's see.
I mean, you could add the full title on there and then you could just put Fire Marshal Report in parentheses and then we could refer to it as the Fire Marshal
How
Report.
about fire marshal report, parentheses, CRT or K, and keep those buzzwords that belong to us rightfully, I think, out of their title.
Can I make one suggestion? Since we have local fire marshal, I'd like to call it state fire marshal.
Yeah,
So state fire marshal's
Yeah.
report.
Mhm.
Okay. Lisa, are you okay with that?
I am.
Okay. All right.
If you want to abbreviate it SFMR, you could.
No, it's okay.
And I was like looking at this thing here, you know, we've got all this stuff on J.H. Baxter in hand, this paper, which I think is not a good argument for how good our program is, because we don't cover it. But here it says the fire marshal reports are not available for J.H. Baxter because it's not regulated under
Yeah, there was not
the,
a J.H. Baxter report.
the fire marshal. The state fire marshal does not have reports for J.H. Baxter?
Not publicly available,
Oh, not publicly available.
right? Because that's what we're
Well, so then
trying to show.
maybe that sentence is not correctly, because this business is not regulated under this agency. Maybe that needs to be because,
Fire marshal reports are not publicly available for J.H. Baxter, period.
Okay.
That's what it is.
Okay, that's.
Yeah, I can't believe that the fire marshal report is supposed to be totally comprehensive. The
Well,
availability.
right, because they like to claim that their product is a pesticide and is not regulated by any of these laws.
Well, I don't think that applies to fire marshal reports for the emergency responders. You get it.
Well, we said publicly available.
Yeah, public, yeah, the public availability. I don't even know that that's even a criteria, because there's no regulation
Yeah, there's
under fire
there's
marshal.
regulation under pesticide law that the public is not allowed to know anything.
Oh, that it's supposed to be secret
Yeah.
because of security threats or something?
No, just because it's a pesticide.
is that a good lobby?
Yep, yeah, well said.
Okay, but it's
so-
still reported. The fire marshal collects the information so that they can respond appropriately.
Probably, I mean,
As far as,
Routine,
I
yeah.
can,
yeah.
when I did one of those, we had to report everything, sand, you know, WD-40, dish soap.
So that was a good clarification.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else before I summarize? Because we have gone 15 minutes over time. So far.
So do we need,
Oh.
go ahead.
I think you're gonna say.
I was just saying, do we need to have a better final summary statement? Is that,
Well, I guess my question, as a follow-up to that, was, do the advocacy members feel that we've reviewed the information enough to start talking about an advocacy conclusion, which equates to an advocacy-based recommendation for the future of the toxics program? And
Do we feel we finished the last section?
that was my previous question.
Oh.
Does anybody have anything else?
I think the question is, did we accomplish everything in this phase of it at this meeting, or do we need to do more? Is that?
Well, I guess it's two questions. So first, does anybody have anything else that they want to include as a bullet point or an additional paragraph? And the second point is, do all of you feel ready to make a recommendation on the future of the program? Meaning any of these 5 options that were recommended by city council and city manager, or something else.
5 options
Let me ask a question. Is this what would constitute the very end, we should need advocacy, information or conclusion here? Is that what the conclusion is, or what we recommend?
Yes.
And you feel we've covered the strengths of the program and made it as a case for why it's a desirable, necessary program? Short of that conclusion?
I can't think of anything else. That's a question for the advocacy, for all of you advocacy members.
Well, you'll give us a draft just to go over, right?
No, I'm just kidding, of course. I was also gonna take a second to kind of read over what we discussed here today,
Yes.
if people think that would be helpful. So while you're thinking about the second question, how about I read?
Well,
Oh,
wait, let's see,
It's
you asked
on
about
that.
the 5 options here.
That's what we're thinking
well,
about.
that's
Okay.
that's question 2 you're thinking about while I'm reading.
Okay,
Okay, so I have one homework assignment besides making the changes I'm about to read. I'm gonna check in with the Oregon State Fire Marshal's report program manager to just double check with him that what their reporting quantities are these average and a maximum amount on hand, amount transported in and away, and the location. Just double make sure that's accurate, and then kind of ask the question, well, where are those shown on the publicly available report? So, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. And so if the answer is, yes, that's what our reporting quantities are, and no, those are not available on the publicly available reports, is there any information the advocacy members want to add into our gap impact analysis about that? So just, I'm trying to act proactively, ask you proactively, if they don't change anything, either what's available publicly, which I doubt, or what their definitions of reporting quantities are we gonna wanna add any more detail in? Specifically to call that out, or no?
I think the memo is okay, because we just tweaked the wording a little bit. If it is in fact the case that companies are required to report all 5 data points, but we can only access 1, then I think it would be nice if that was noted in the chart somewhere. Presumably under the public access information box.
Okay. And I do remember that being said before, I just didn't write it down. I'm writing, Lisa.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the changes I'm going to make are on the cover page of the memo, option number 3, combine Eugene's program with Oregon State Fire Marshal's program. I'm gonna put in parentheses, State Fire Marshal report. And then on the first page of the advocacy information section, where it says Oregon Community Right to Know and Protection Act, instead of CR2K, I think I'll put all of that in a parentheses that says also known as, but I'll just first title it as State Fire Marshal's report. So then reading on after it lists all the names of the programs, change shows that each program has very different to each program has significantly different. At the end of that paragraph, eliminate the word factors before the semicolon. 1, 2, 3. The 4th bullet down is going to now read, it is the only program that requires materials balance accounting, meaning that total inputs and total outputs are equivalent. A sub-bullet of that is going to be the EPA TRI is a self-reporting program. Yes?
After the words are equivalent, can you read that sentence again?
It is the only program that requires materials balance accounting, meaning that totals, inputs, and total outputs are equivalent.
I feel like we need to say a method that provides a high level of accuracy.
That'll be a second sentence.
Or just comment on that, would that provide a high level? We have to tell them why it's important to balance.
Okay, so my note, I think, for the indent was that, the EPA TRI program, is a self-reporting program, making it not as accurate. Is that even necessary?
It's not
Self-reporting without,
verification,
yes, there you go.
yeah, it's not as verifiable.
Oh, I feel that note so much.
Trust but verify.
Mhm.
Okay, so then, where am I here? Sorry, I have notes all over the place. Oh, here we go. Sorry.
I do have another item when you're finished.
Something we were just talking about. Well, I'm gonna add something in between the data reports are easily accessible bullet and to compare data reports between Eugene's program bullet. But I can't find my note on it right now, so I apologize. But it was one of the last points we made about the Eugene program. So for the 3 bullets under actual calling out of the results of data reports comparison is now gonna read, LRAPA reports were not publicly available for Oregon Tread Rubber or Thermo Fisher Scientific. The Oregon State Fire Marshal's reports were not publicly available for J.H. Baxter. EPA TRI reports were not publicly available for Thermo Fisher Scientific.
Is that the issue that the Thermo Fisher, the information is not collected or it's not available to the public by EPA?
I don't know. It just was not available. There was nothing publicly available on them. And I had guessed, to put in the reason because they're not regulated. But we talked about how that's probably not accurate,
Yeah,
so we're just taking that part out.
let's just say that,
And we don't know the because, so we probably shouldn't say
yeah,
a because.
right, yeah,
Right?
yeah. Do we need the word publicly available?
Yes,
Publicly available as opposed to available.
right.
You
Because
wanna say
probably
that?
for first responders,
The TRI.
I would hope.
The EPA stuff. We don't know if they collected.
right,
So let's just say they're not. Well, if we say available, it means to us, implied.
Well, but if
'Cause-
you just say they're not available, then it's not, I think it's
Yeah.
unclear whether that just means couldn't find them, or you,
Yeah,
it
let's
was a
see.
glitch, you know.
Or we could say not available by City of Eugene or something.
well, no, I wasn't acting as a Stevie G.
Oh, okay, you were acting
Fire
as a
department
public.
employee.
Okay,
I mean,
all right, you were just asking as if you were in public.
yeah,
Okay,
right.
then let's say it that way.
Yeah. And that's how.
We don't know if they have it. We didn't try to act as an official government entity, making a
Right.
formal request, so yeah, just say publicly available.
Right. It was hard for me, but.
Okay.
But I am a member of the public too, so.
That's right.
It wasn't that hard.
Yeah.
Okay, so, on the first page of the advocacy information, the last bullet, that last sentence is now gonna read, this information is not part of the State Fire Marshal's Office reports available to the public because the State Fire Marshal's Office, available to the public upon request because the State Fire Marshal's reports identify the amounts of materials present at the site. And fixing the typo in the last sentence of that same paragraph so that it says the LRAPA reports do not contain information regarding submissions of specific toxic chemicals that is readily accessible to members of the public. And I might need to wordsmith this, so don't quote me. Nor is it readily understandable by members of the public. And then the other point in that sentence is going to be that LRAPA only covers air emissions. And then we're going to add another bullet. By contrast, the State Fire Marshal's Office report, the purpose of the State Fire Marshal's report is to
By the way, while we're doing this, I'm trying to get information off the State Fire Marshal webpage and the C2RK, whatever it's called.
yeah.
Wow, is it a barrier? You have to register, you have to identify yourself, you have to provide home address, business address, email, phone numbers.
Yeah, they don't want people planning their dangerous mischief. You know, I mean, that's security issues.
Yeah, I mean, if I were a busy, let's say a mother who didn't go on this kind of a very technical website, I would go down to kicking it out.
So the last part of that sentence will just quote from the matrix, State Fire Marshal's report. Purpose of program is to provide emergency responders and emergency planners, assisting them with hazardous materials, pre-emergency planning and response. So that's my homework. And then a couple of other things I have is to say more details on the EPA TRI program is self-reporting and doesn't require transparent accounting of data versus material balancing is accurate. I think I'm missing a few words on emissions and use of toxic products. No other programs require accuracy to this level.
When you say transparent, that was, what were the words you used?
Don't require transparent accounting of data.
What would you think of supporting documentation?
Yeah, well, I have to kind of mix that with what I read already. I just wanted to make sure I didn't, I read all of the points that I have to add.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think any.
I'll make it make sense,
I'm sorry.
I promise.
None of these programs are requiring supporting documentation, right? Or at least our program, they fill out the reporting form online and they enter, right? And
Yes.
TRI looks like the same. I think I understand from Lisa is the same. They don't have to submit receipts or
No,
anything.
but okay, yeah, maybe it's not documentation, but.
Yeah, because we don't require supporting documentation, and up until now, the program has not had the capacity or the policy to, follow with the verification like site visits.
Okay, it's sort of detail, we require more detail.
Right, yeah. And this was, I think, just kind of defining more the materials balancing piece. So, Did I forget anything?
510.
Okay,
Okay, well, so I hope maybe if this I think could be dealt with quickly, but and if I apologize if I missed it in the first 5 minutes here, but these 5 bullet points on the first page, it says that the options, that these are options that the counselors are looking at. It's very prominent. I think we need a reword on a couple of them. Number 1 is fine. Work with the state to raise the $2,000 state imposed fee cap. I think it's pretty well implied what you do. You have your lobbyists work with the legislators, they change whatever rules. That's an administrative rule or a court decision. It's not in the language of the charter. Number 2, maintain the program to current standards and support with additional funding. I would add the words if needed or as needed, because we're predicting there will be a funding problem, and it's not absolutely guaranteed, though. I would just say as needed. Okay. Third, combine Eugene's program with the Oregon State Fire Marshal's program. That would require a big rewrite of the charter. So for a counselor, what it really means is refer to the voters an amended version that combines our program with reporting forward. Okay? It's a referral to the voters to rewrite the charter amendment. There's no other way that that could be accomplished without a referral to the voters. 4, meet only the minimum requirements of the charter amendment. That's somebody's interpretation of where not now. It implies that we're going beyond the minimum in a way, but it's an interpretation. So I would say apply a strict interpretation of the minimum requirements of charter amendment to lower costs. That's what it would be, a reinterpretation of what is the minimum. Based on the discussion with the lawyer the other day, that there are many things that would be cost effective that are not explicitly specified. I would say reinterpret the minimum requirements to lower costs. And 5th, eliminate the program. That should say refer to the voters a proposal to eliminate the program. And I think this is just more accurate for the way a city councilor would look at it. How can we solve this problem? And just say eliminate the program. I thought, oh, check, that's easy.
Well,
No.
I mean, maybe we could just add a sentence that says options 3 and 5 would require referral to the voters.
But they're different. They're different. One is an amendment that goes to the voters. The other is to eliminate the program. Big difference in the kind of campaign and persuade the voters. Whether I would just say refer to the voters' proposal to eliminate the program.
yeah, so you probably weren't here for that part, where I was explaining, as much as I don't want to add any more paper to this, part of this information packet to the council is that memo where after I did a lot of research on every single option and what it would take and what's the pros and cons and what would be the barriers.
But I feel like this is really prominent when they look at this memo right here on the first page. Oh yeah, what are my choices? And you just say eliminate the program. Well, put a thing to the voters, have a discussion, eliminate the program. That's really accurate. It's not just like check, I want to get rid of it. It's like the whole process is quite complex. And
I think the city councilors should be expected to at least know that this is a charter mandated program.
Well, and just to assure everybody that whenever I take anything to city council, I have to do an agenda item summary. So I take the first page of every agenda item summary that I go to council for any little thing to remind them all the main points of the program. And the first sentence is about how this is a charter mandated program. And then I give a little bit of history on what's happened with the program since its inception, just so that everybody can start on the same page.
Yeah, I just feel like the way, this may be the way it came down from elsewhere, but I feel like it's prejudicial against the program to equate working with the state to modify this fee cap, which can be done without any big to-do. I mean, not to say that it's automatic, and then on the other hand, eliminate the program, which is a whole political process in the community, to just say eliminate the program and have it implied, or that they have to look elsewhere, or remember, oh, it's a charter amendment. I think it should be right in there. And I don't think that working with the state needs to be hire the lobbyist and talk to the legislator. I think working with the state is adequate to explain that's all we need to do is work
Well,
with
we
it.
get the legislature to rewrite the law,
Yeah, I know,
which
and
is not as,
well, we could say work with state legislators. That would be fine, to be a little bit more specific. It's, well, actually, I think it's somewhat complicated, but not as complicated as trying to pass a thing to get rid of our community right to know. And if I were a counselor, that's what I wanted to know, and I don't think I think just saying eliminate the program gets you going too far in that angle before, you know, and it just, and then meet only the minimum requirements of the charter amendment. That's endorsing somebody else's idea that that we're carrying out the program well above the minimum, significantly above the minimum. We're pursuing an interpretation that we're meeting the minimum requirements right now, according to my interpretation. Somebody else says, oh, so it's an interpretation, and the reason what they want is an interpretation that lowers the costs. And so I think that's accurate. And so I think that's prejudicial against the program, that statement, meet only the minimum requirements. Somebody decided that we aren't meeting the minimum requirements, and we're endorsing that interpretation, and it's, I'd say, in dispute.
we're more than meeting the minimum requirements, which is why we were arguing so much about what the word list means.
Yeah,
Okay, so, we're past time. What do you as a group wanna do? Do you, because on the first page of this memo, Randy, sorry, it's gonna stay as is. One option can be to take all of these options, read through the details on the research that I've done already, and have another work group meeting where we kind of respond from an advocacy perspective to all of these options. Or we come to another advocacy work group meeting just to talk about what our one recommendation is gonna be.
Are you saying, do you feel that the modifications to the language I proposed disagree with your explanatory language?
Well, I'm saying, this is what the city council and the city manager asked me and all of you to look into.
That's their language.
So that's
So
their language, so
they would, that's their.
on the first page, it's their language. You know, if the advocacy members as a group decide it's important to kind of.
So you feel like we shouldn't change that language because they handed it to us?
Well, because I think it's
There's an
important.
argument about whether to change the language or not. Sorry to be so quiet, but I was trying to do a comparison with the fire marshal, because that's one of those options mentioned, just folded into the fire marshal program. The two are so different, and rather than trying to change the language given, which I guess is what Joe was saying, given to us, let's tell them why that's foolhardy. It's just a cursory look. I just put in xylene under the fire marshal program. There's 2 industries in Eugene that emit xylene, but according to our Toxins Right to Know program, there are, approximately, I'm going to guess 12.
Well,
And we
there's.
know exactly how much xylene.
Yeah, no doubt about it, and I don't know that I would say though that it's foolhardy. I mean, that's sort of, but what it means is just amend the program so reporting is congruent with the Oregon State Fire Marshal's program. We would have to amend it, and the process would be through the voters. So we say amend through voter for our program, and then they get an understanding of what's involved. And it's actually much easier than trying to persuade people to eliminate it, and compares with working with the state legislators or whatever word. So
It would still take a vote of the city.
it would, but I wouldn't say that it's like impossible. It is something that could be considered reasonably.
Well, maybe what Lisa mentioned could be added as a bullet point. Because we haven't done any of that sort of analysis in our comparing the individual reports. But that is a very good point.
And maybe Randy's thing can also be a bullet point. If we're not allowed to change the words, combine Eugene program with Oregon State Fire Marshal, then we should spell out that would take a vote of the people. It cannot be a decision by the city council. They may not realize that without Joe's.
Yeah.
Can I ask so we wrote a gap analysis, which is not really a response to these 5 points. Are we now trying to pick one of these to choose?
Okay, so it's very confusing. Okay, so I just want to be clear, and I know we're, again, past time. I find it very important for all of our audiences to kind of bring the full circle back. I'm afraid on the very front page, when I'm trying to remember, when we are trying to remind the mayor and city council, you know, why we're including this in our annual report, I want them to be able to recognize the language that they've already heard great detail about over the last couple of years. So it's not that, you know, there's some hard rule, we can't change the language. I just think for better tracking purposes and getting them on board with why we're here talking about this with them, to kind of keep the consistent language that we've been using with them on the front page. And we can have a bullet or a series of bullets where we talk about in great detail from an advocacy perspective why or why not we think these options, you know, would or wouldn't work. And again, what my biggest recommendation is, I think all of you need to go back and review that that memo that I sent to them a few years ago, where it's really a summary of all the results of the full, you know, research I did on every single option and what it would take, and not in terms of numbers about how much staff time, and then in every single one, you know, calling out whether or not it would result in a vote of the public or things like that.
One thing that would solve most of the problem that I have with this is to strike the word work with the state. Just say raise the $2,000 state imposed fee cap. Why would you show the method for that one and not the method with the others? You know, so let's just get them thinking like, I see, do that, and what does that take? And then when they go to the next one, I see, and what does that take? Instead of saying, working with the state, why do we need to say that? You said it was state imposed. So if we say eliminate the program instead of saying refer to the voters a proposal, if we don't want that in there, then they will be already thinking, and what does it take to do that? Why do not say work with the state? It's up to the reader to fill in the blank. What does it take to carry that out and to go further into the document to read what you have written? It's inconsistent to give the method work with the state when we didn't give the method, which is very different in each case. And so that would do a lot to make it work effectively, as because it's a mishmash here. And then but I still don't like meet only the minimum requirements charter amendment unless I missed it and we are all agreed that we are not currently working at a minimum level. I don't agree with that. But if we do, if that's our determination, then okay, we can say that. I would also say support with additional funding as needed, because this is a prediction of the future. We are not in additional, you mean like city funds not based on fees is what is implied, additional funding?
See, this is where I think Joe's memo gets into all these details.
Yeah,
because-
but this is the upfront, this is the executive summary, and this
Well,
is.
can we put a note in there that says, please, you know, following are the previously proposed options for resolving this structural funding problem, and put a note that says, you know, as critiqued, or what's something, some little footnote that says see Joe's memo of 2 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you can say it more eloquently.
So, sorry, it was a hard one for me to keep up with. Yeah, are those 5 points language that came from somewhere else?
Yes, it came from a city council meeting, and it was a direction from city councilors and city manager.
So I just want to get it clear, if Randy was suggesting that we wordsmith, those were the exact words in a memo.
No, it was at a meeting. It was at a city council meeting, a city council work session.
Okay, and how did those words come to us?
Through me, because I was at the city council meeting.
So those are your notes?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can wordsmith them.
Well, we can, but at this point, every time we've brought information on these options to city council, the options have been titled in this way.
But
So I would, let's not continue to perpetuate it then. Or let's make sure we go from here forward being,
I'm not suggesting to rewrite any or make them unrecognizable. I think they should be the exact same 5 points recognizable. I just want to add additional funding if needed and strike the method part, work with the state, just raise the $2,000 state imposed fee cap. As, you know, we don't need to start telling them we're telling her. Why tell them that? If we
Well,
didn't
that
tell
was the specific direction, so.
Yeah, well, but why doesn't eliminate the program say by putting a voter referral to eliminate Oregon, you know?
Because that was not part of the direction.
But it is in reality what
Well,
it
that's
means.
what's covered in Joe's memo.
Yeah, but I mean, I want the memo that summarizes to right up front, remind them of the important points. And if we're not going to provide the essential to, you know, like have a voter campaign in the public and, you know, to a ballot issue, we just say eliminate it and they'll have to think of that themselves. Don't provide it with the other to give them the idea that it's just like some push the button and it happens.
Well, we can cite to Joe's memo, and that is gonna be included in the packet.
Yes.
We send to them all at once, right?
Yes.
Well, I think a summary should say right up front, you know, what's involved, so that you can just, they're busy, they get pages and pages of stuff, and they should just, if it isn't written explicitly, then their mind should fill in what it is. And there's no need to say work with the state when you have a state imposed fee cap, just say raise the state imposed fee cap. And then their mind starts turning in the way that it needs to be to process the other options, which is, that's all I want, is them to recognize that's not an easy option. It looks easy when you say combine Eugene's program with the Oregon State Fire Marshal. That makes it look easy. We can't do that without a big process, so I don't want it to look easy.
So, this cover page is from the Toxics Board as a whole. So I would need the entire Toxics Board to agree with those changes.
I think if you put it in front of people, you know, the least possible wordsmithing, that it would be agreeable. It's not prejudicial against any, to reword it that way. I think it is prejudicial now, but just say raise the state imposed fee cap. Say,
well, let's not take, a whole lot of time discussing this. I think you've made a good point. That it's late.
Yeah.
And there's more important things to decide about.
So, I mean, just as an alternative option, in the advocacy section, we can, you know, further explain the concerns we have with the direction or the statements as given, however much detail all of you as a group decide you want to explain.
So as a question, are we coming back together, I mean, is the goal of this for the Toxics Board as a whole to provide a recommended path forward?
Yes.
So,
A recommended long-term path forward.
I don't know that we need to separately, as advocates, address all of our concerns with these, because I think they're probably gonna be the same for most of the industry reps too. I mean, everybody's gonna recognize that it's a huge process to go raise the state fee cap or eliminate the program or all of those things.
I'm not so sure it is. But maybe people may think so. It depends on how good a lobbyist the city has.
Well, the city would be up against the Chamber of Commerce, so they've been pretty effective in the past. So I think actually we could just have that discussion with the group as a whole. guys are amenable to that.
No, it makes more sense. We think of something that doesn't reflect the whole board. We got enough problem to handle.
I mean, yeah, I think if we come together as a whole group and then we, as the advocates, are feeling like we have some points of view that are being reflected in the group's consensus or whatever, then we can come back and add them. How about that?
My comment, just that if looking at those options there, the natural way, if I were a counselor, would be to go to this, reinterpret this and just trim it down to the minimum. That would be the most desirable option. The implication being that we're going above and beyond. We say current standards is not the minimum. But my impression from the meeting with the lawyers here a week ago is that it's debatable whether we are doing our minimum or whether we're significantly above and beyond, just carrying out the minimum in a way that makes the most sense.
I think she said we're clearly doing more than the minimum, and it makes sense to do more than the minimum. Even though it's not required.
Yeah, that's.
And we are gonna discuss this as a
Yeah.
whole board at the next meeting.
Yeah, well, so that, I think needs to be known that this, because one lawyer said it that way, but that's my read of it, and that has to be the thing that people need to be considering once they say, oh, that's the easiest option, you know.
Well, I think we should probably address, I mean, we can do that as a group, but we obviously need to address the fact that we think this is for the next meeting, but I was thinking we should come up with a category for that chart. We've got charter mandated, we could have indispensable to efficient program administration per the board's opinion or something, some category like that we think.
Most
That's
effective,
gonna include updating the list of reportable chemicals and process for identifying.
cost effective versus explicitly mandated, explicit or implicit. Implicit because it's cost effective.
Okay.
Yeah.
We still need to meet as an advocacy group to talk about our conclusion. Do you want that after the November 20th meeting? Because we need to have this done before December 31st, all of this.
So do we just
the entire
need
full report?
A sentence in conclusion?
It can be just a sentence, because that's what the industry's recommendation is.
Okay. And is it possible to share sentences via email or not?
Yes, proposals,
Proposals?
yes. Group decision needs to happen publicly.
Could we share sentences among email, proposed sentences before the next meeting, and then like at the end of the next meeting, have a 5-minute advocacy section where we approve the sentence?
Yeah.
Can we do, does that sound good?
Sure.
Yeah, and keep me included on those emails, so for public record and tracking purposes. And then I'll just include that in the packet.
Okay. Does somebody want to take the lead on zoning out the first proposed sentence? Randy just shook his head no. Lisa?
I'm up for
Um,
about 60
Just,
hours a week
just
of work.
what our recommendation is.
Oh, yeah, 1-sentence summary recommendation. Or whatever, concluding sentence.
Or concluding a couple of sentences. It
Okay.
doesn't have to be limited to one sentence.
How do you want this report to end?